afternoon, everybody. Steve, can you you can hear me and you can see me, yeah? Yeah, good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, depending on where you are. Firstly, a big warm welcome to our first webinar. I'm delighted to be joined today by Steve Hemmings from Southend-On-Sea Borough Council. And our webinar this afternoon is entitled Impact of Covid-19 on Local Government. Bear with me, I'm also admitting people as they join. Today, we are also going to be recording the webinar. Two reasons for that. One, it helps us to reflect on how we can improve our presentations and going forward. And secondly, for those who are unable to attend, we can then put the recording up on LinkedIn and share it with others so they can watch it in their own time. So that's the intro, and we'll go into the high-level webinar content. I'll do a quick introduction to myself, and so will Steve. I'll be kind of just running through a little bit of some data points that I've captured over the last year or so as the COVID-19 pandemic has hit and the impact of that on business and technology. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the implications and the opportunities that has arisen in local government institutions, and particularly councils, and then thinking about the optimization challenge, and with a particular focus on technology, how that enables the digital change. We're going to be actively asking for your participation. So we've got at least two Slido survey polls to run with you. And we'll do the one just after section 4. And then I'll be handing over to Steve, who's going to be telling us about the wonderful digital stroke IT transformation journey that he and his team have been on. And I can tell you that is really, really insightful. I've been through it a couple of times with Steve, and it's really enthralling. And then me and Steve will wrap up around some of the key takeaways, and we will be again reaching out to you to kind of listen to you about in terms of what you would like to hear from us next, as we like to turn this into a series of talks, and we'll try to open it up for Q&A. But before I do introductions, we both would like you to actively put questions up on the chat function. If there's anything that sparks some thoughts or comments or some questions, do put it on the chat function. It really does give us an opportunity to address that. Now, if we can't, Steve will pick it up, or I will pick it up, and we'll try to give you our fullest response on that. And everybody should be able to have access to that. As a kind of quick opener, could people just put in the chat function where they are today, just to get some participation? So all I'm looking for is which city you're in, and that will be great. So, Lee's in London. I'm in London. Richard's in Southend. I assume Richard's in your team, Steve.
No, he's one of the. It's currently one of our strategic partners here at Southend.
Okay. Got Aaron in Southend, Terry in Southend. We've got Essex, Canvey Island, Beckenham. That's Iqbal. Zainab is Hertfordshire from Penna, I know. Basil and John Hart. Jay Colbert in Chelmsford. Awesome. So that's quite a southeast, southwest kind of contingent. That's nice. Essex as well, Leslie. Oh, great. Thank you for that. That's kind of great. So we'll move into kind of introductions. A little bit about me. I have spent something like 25 plus years in technology and IT. I started off in the kind of defense sector. And as you can see, there's a whole array of organizations I've either worked for, or a whole bunch of organizations I've worked with, from defense into the financial services into management consultancy. And you can see I've worked with the big global service providers, system integrators, to pure advisory services. And I've actually built out a business transformation capability practice in a boutique. But more recently, about 5 years ago, I decided to build my own brand, and it's called IQS, Innovative Quality Solutions. And I provide two things: one, interim services and consultancy. And some of the interim organizations I've worked for, you can see there. I was the interim CIO at Durham University, and particularly relevant to the local government, I was the head of technology and intelligence at Wakefield District Council. And most recently, I finished assignment up at Excel last year as the head of technology. So some real practical experience on running IT departments, which makes me, I feel a little bit more rounded rather than just coming from a pure consulting background. There's more people coming in, Steve, as I admit, so I'm going to hand over to you so you can introduce yourself while I admit people.
So good afternoon. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Steve Hemmings, currently Head of Enterprise Architecture and Digital Innovation here at Southend. My background is quite varied, but the majority of the time I'm very much focused in the enterprise architecture space. I joined Southend from Coyce Consulting last year. Wanted to join the Southend journey simply because it was a fascinating opportunity, and the team that I'd been working with for the year prior were fantastic and are fantastic. So it's a good reason to come along. Some of the specialisms or background that I've had have been varying across operating model design, digital transformation, specifically and mostly in and around the finance sector. Business process optimization seems to follow me wherever I go, and I'm pointed towards as part of the operating model design piece. And then obviously the one thing that everyone's focused on specifically at the moment is around cost optimization and sourcing as well. Thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you, Steve. Pleasure to have you here and for you to share your insights and what you've been up to. So I wanted to start off with giving people some data and some information to set the context around digital transformation and digital disruption. Here's some data from last year that was garnered by Gartner. And as the pandemic hit, they were reached out to senior executives and asking them, where do they think investment's going to go? And there's two plots here. One on the left-hand side just says the top piece was accelerating digital business initiatives and a focus on improving operational excellence through digital business, and third highest being how to drive high levels of cost optimization through digital initiatives. And on the right, you can see, whilst there's some tangible investment going on in R&D, product development, IT and technology sits at the top with about 7% increase predicted. That tells its own story. And I think just to give you another plot, to bring it closer to home to date, this is from data from this year from PwC CEO survey results. And what they went out to over 5,000 respondents, and they asked the same question: where do you think long-term investment is going to happen over the next 3 years as a consequence of COVID-19? And what you can see, I'm not going to run through all the buckets on the bar charts there, but on the far left-hand side, you can see that digital transformation stands on its own, in the sense that a lot of the CEOs say, 34% say that there's going to be at least a moderate increase of 3 to 9%, where 50% of them think there'll be significant investment above 10%. So I think that tells you the story that the investment in technology and digital change is has already been, there's been significant investment in that pre-COVID, but it's going to continue for at least the foreseeable future. And I wanted to just kind of nail my point from this LinkedIn survey. As you can see, from something like 375 participants, they said, well, what's actually driven your organization to move to remote working, to online working? And as you can see, COVID-19 has been that accelerator more than the CEO, the CTO. There wasn't a mandate from the CEO when COVID-19, there was a mandate for COVID-19 to move to remote working. And we all know the stories around how we made that shift. But I think a year plus into the pandemic, I think those hybrid delivery ways of working are going to stick in some shape or form, and be interesting how that kind of drives out. with that said, I'm just going to give you 4 bucket areas that I think need to be addressed in from a local government perspective, and particularly around council. So, and then these are in no particular order. The first thing is, I think there's a need to continue to protect and expand existing revenue challenges. We all know that local governments there's been investment, but that is going to slowly seep away. And we've been through 10 years of austerity with local government, and the recession that we're in is going to again have an impact on public spending, and finance officers are going to have to be really smart about where they invest. So I think we need to think about where can local government and authorities actually extend, kind of strengthen their existing services. Um, Sorry, I'm just admitting somebody. Um, and there's a thoughts around maybe how you can generate alternative revenue streams. So data monetization. I know a lot of councils have been investing heavily in combining data sets to give some insights. And I think artificial intelligence and machine learning will continue to predominate to give us some predictive and analytics to drive improvements in service areas. And I think we've got to continue to be thinking about citizens, and particularly around ensuring that they can connect with the council through contact centres, and maybe do some automation, particularly RPA, to minimise manual processes that tend to happen today. The second bucket, and I suppose this is going to be the focus of our presentation today, is how do you tackle the cost optimization channel? What are the buckets? And I think COOs, CEOs, CFOs, and CIOs are going to be asked to tighten up on on budgets, and therefore there's a need to focus on what's important, what can you differentiate yourself on, and then eliminating core spend. And I will go into my next slide in a minute, where I'm going to give you some thoughts around how you can go about doing IT cost optimization. My third area is around the longer term challenge. So organizations responded to the pandemic. There was emergency measures put in place. Now they've come out of recovery. But as they come out of recovery, they've got to be really thinking about their long-term strategy and how they're going to work, and how they're going to develop new skills and capabilities to work in a different way. And I think that's where local authorities have got to be thinking about new capabilities and partnerships, and that could be with schools, with business, universities, so that there's a focus on the future, not just short-term cost measures. And in many ways, hopefully the cost optimization can be used as a way of funding the investment in areas where we can really strengthen the connection with people and citizens going forward. The fourth area is absolutely the digital agenda, engaging online through portals, scaling, and bringing in digital solutions, be that in adult social care. I think adult and social care has not, if you think about the Queen's speech, she said just the other day, she was talking about another reform in that area, and that needs to be tackled. I think there's going to be a massive bill for well-being. There's got to be thoughts about how we go about tackling regeneration in communities, because of the disparity that COVID-19 has brought about. And importantly, from a digital perspective, connectivity, having secure Wi-Fi, high fiber connections, 5G, and making sure graduates even coming out of university have the right digital skills to get a job. Yeah, because there's going to be unemployment, and how we tackle that is really important, and government and local authorities have a role to play in that. And as you can see, the opportunities there is about how I think we should be thinking about the smart cities agenda that local government's been on, how you use that to address that levelling up, that connectivity, using data to drive the change that's required. And IT departments also, whilst they invest, they can streamline in certain areas. I did say I'd come back to my second bucket area, and I am going to just talk a little bit about IT cost optimization, because it's an area that I've worked in a number of councils. In my first role at Coventry City Council, I was really focusing on digital and IT transformation, how you take cost out. And here's some of my thoughts before I hand over to Steve a little bit. In this slide, what you see on the, it's kind of an XY plot. On the Y plot, it's kind of the size of the benefit that you can realize. And on the x-axis is 6 bucket areas. And as you go along the x-axis, it's harder to implement, but the rewards are greater as you go from left to right. So the first area is around thinking about demand and supply. So the business always has demands on IT, and it's always a challenge addressing the backbone IT infrastructure, network, and projects in operations, and making sure that there's no pet projects going in, no additional projects that are happening that shouldn't be happening, and they should be aligned to the business goals and objectives. So that's all about looking at the demand and seeing what capacity can fill the demand, and doing resource utilization, and actually getting rid of I've seen in many authorities where there's a proliferation of licenses and software. How can we reduce that? How can we, optimize our spend so we can divert it elsewhere? And secondly, looking at the portfolio of projects again, is just making sure we're working on the right things. I think you can get some benefits through standardization of commercial terms, processes, working to technical standards and specification. So you get a consistency, effectiveness, and efficiency gains. I think a third bucket area is really leveraging third-party suppliers or partners. There's usually hidden costs in contracts, or there's additional benefits that aren't being realized through your third parties. And it's about looking at those contracts and working with your commercial teams and finance teams, and maybe bringing some carrot and stick, maybe aggregating suppliers to get more value. Then thinking about the commercial models that goes on with suppliers. So what I'm talking about there is thinking about moving from reoccurring kind of time and material contracts to moving to fixed fee outcome based contracts, and bundling things into work packages that give you actual tangible value. Two final areas, one around delivery. So delivery models are difficult, especially around the change, but we can always think about how we can maybe deliver things more nearshore, bringing stuff in or taking stuff out that adds value, moving to the cloud, and in a hybrid cloud model. We all know that there's Amazon, AWS, and a number of providers, GCP and Alibaba, now providing 63% of the world's compute and storage power. Which one's right for you, and how can you get value by maybe multi-tenanting it and having multiple cloud providers? RPA I've mentioned already, automating business processes so we reduce waste, and I've already talked about AI and data analytics. And the final area is taking a bit more of a holistic review, looking across your whole IT estate, looking at your infrastructure, your applications, your data, and how that aligns to the business goals, and making sure that you think big but start small. And I've got a red arrow there because I know Steve's going to delve into the Southend story, where he actually starts at looking at the whole estate. But before I hand over to Steve, a little bit more of an interaction, please, from our audience. We'd like to run our first Slido poll. What you can see on the screen is a little barcode, which will allow you through your laptop or your mobile device, or even on your desktop if you're in the office, to go to slido.com. Please stay on Slido because we've got another poll coming up a little bit later. But if you can get into Slido, there's a code there, or it should go straight automatically. Well, the question that we have for you is, could you, in 1 or 2 words, describe your current digital optimization challenge or challenges in your institution. And hopefully what this will do is generate for us a word cloud. And I'm going to just flip over to that. So here we have, Steve, can you see that? Just to
Yep.
make sure. So if we could have your active participation, that would be greatly appreciated. Right, there we go. Steve, I think it's time for you have to reflect on some of these comments as they come in. Vibance, that's an interesting comment. What's that mean?
Someone
Finance. I think that's finance.
Yeah. Okay. Resource. Cost.
Cost, governance, experience.
Yeah, skills. Technology. Okay. So skills, the big one. So interesting so far that we're not seeing culture or existing behaviour there yet. I'm looking at a couple of these that are coming through and know exactly where they're coming from. So probably joined by Mr. Andrews, who's there putting some of the stuff around purchasing maturity from his procurement perspective.
Well, there's 23 people on this call at least, minimum. We've only had 12 respondents. So could I please urge everybody to at least give us one word or two? And if you're a consultant, think about the projects that you've worked in within your a particular organization, institution where you have felt a particular pain around digital optimization. Skills has come out. That's amazing, actually.
Okay. All right.
So, Steve, what's your thoughts?
So I can relate to a lot of this at Southend, certainly. I think skills is an interesting one, certainly one that we'll touch on. I mean, in the positions that we've taken up here on Southend, the journey we've been on, it's been important and almost vital that we bring in or augment with a set of skills. And we'll be talking about how we've done that here at Southend with our partner network. But yeah, I think that gives us a good starter. So
yeah, a big thank you to everybody to kick us off on that. So we'll flick back to our presentation because that adds as a great segue for Steve to talk to us about the journey that Southend have been on. Thank you.
Thanks, Cody. So yeah, so good afternoon. So just to recap then and set the scene. So our challenge really was to respond to COVID-19, maintain operational levels and support transformational activity here at the council and what is known here as 2050 as a set of as a strategic premise really, and the individual transformation programs that we run here. We're consolidating those at the moment, but at the time of going into COVID, we did have several. To set the scene on, us as technologists here and as transformation leaders, the technology department here had just gone through a reorganisation that had been delivered through its strategic partner course. That model was introduced in January 2020, so just on the cusp of COVID, of the COVID pandemic starting. 45% of the posts for that new organisation structure needed to be recruited for. And anybody who's been in public sector long enough knows just what the struggles and challenges are there in recruiting what for us was a new way and a new way of thinking. Some of the principles that were applied there was public sector first. We wanted to bring in we want to bring new experience, new skill set that probably wasn't already existing within the organisation and in public sector in general. So there was an opportunity there. In terms of a portfolio of works, we used to lose count in all honesty, but roughly circa 145 individual work streams, both across technology and business. Absolute, realization and acceptance that there was capacity, capability, and experience gaps throughout the department, which did mean that you would spread some of your key resource really thin, or in other areas things just didn't get done to the quality or the performance that you necessarily needed. So you had to have different levels of experience there when leading and managing the department. Technical debt was occurring across all parts of the estate. There was a lot of sticky tape and plaster here. We used to joke that it almost felt like a hospital ward at times. There was so much plaster around, tying everything together. And unfortunately, due to the state that the technology department was in at the time, there was an amount of shadow IT identified across the wider organisation, and with that comes cost and risk that needed to be brought through.
Sure.
So what did we do about it? So if we can go to the next slide. So, the problem statement immediately was insufficient awareness and structure. Going into COVID, some of our strategic programs were already underway. We had started to look at and to design a number of the key application and asset renewals that we knew we needed to undertake. So DMS for us was device standardization, move to Windows 10, and start introducing what are the new product sets available to support those. We're a Microsoft house here, so we've standardized to Intune and Autopilot. Across the application set, we knew that we needed to upgrade Civica for us, which is document management. And across the across the infrastructure estate and network in particular, we knew we had a number of problems that we needed to tackle. However, that being said, as we were going on those journeys, we were repeatedly facing a number of issues in regards to that technical debt, that complexity of the estate, just the unknown. And it got to a point where that insufficient awareness and structure of the department was really inhibiting us. Documentation had never been on the agenda really at Southend until the COIS team had arrived, certainly. But then even during that period, it had really been hard to spark the interest and the importance of that within our department. And certainly process and responsibility structure just wasn't where it needed to be, given where we were. So moving into the early part of the summer period, I joined, the rest of the leadership team were formed, very quickly came together and realised that we needed to put a plan of action together to cover, and to gain that insight and that awareness. So in the next slide, I'm going to be walking through a number of the activities that we undertook and the outcomes that we captured.
You tell me when you want to go, Steve.
Yeah, so next slide would be great, please, mate. Yeah. So the technology architecture function that I manage here took sole responsibility for a lot of this in leading. Thankfully, I've been graced with joining and taking ownership of a team here that is, very capable of doing the job that they need to do. Has to be said that not everyone, not every local authority will probably be blessed with such experience, but I have been here. So we started to lead from the front. The first one was it's not bring your own device, it's bring out your dead. So we run a series of sessions both across our product lines and our infrastructure engineering and network teams, just to understand what risks, issues, threats, concerns they had. We used a technical reference model as a point of reference, if you like, to capture and record all of that information. And it really was quite startling, but it gave everyone an opportunity to take a deep breath and to probably release some of that built up stress and tension that they'd built up, that had developed over a period of time prior to certainly the organisation structure changing. That gave us an initial view of just what size of work we were focusing on, and it was quite considerable, to say the least. Basing off of that technical reference point, we then knew where we need to focus on, and in no particular order. The first one that we started looking at was our end user compute review. Obviously, as I've already mentioned, we had our DMS program in place, but anyone who's done desktop, laptop, or any form of asset refresh knows that, you know, the real detail is required in understanding that estate before you try and transform it. We used a product called Lakeside, which we procured through our partner Phoenix, and that gives us an excellent insight into everything that's operating across our end user computer estate. That informed just, you know, the size and the complexity that we faced across that program, and certainly helped us to set and manage expectations with the business and how long that journey was going to take. The next one was the EA review, EA standing for Enterprise Agreement or the Microsoft Licensing Agreement. We had already started on our 365 journey, but utilisation and management of those licenses we knew wasn't up to scratch. Again, working with our partners at the time, for this piece, we actually awarded the works to Utilisation. We were able to conduct a belt and braces review of where those licenses, where our existing license pool were being deployed, utilisation levels. This informed not only immediate and future remediation works, but informed the EA renewal that we've just completed. For some of these who followed me on LinkedIn, we've been very fortunate to receive the funding to now move to E5. We are one of the first, certainly in Essex, to move to full E5 suite. People will say, so what? That's a significant step for us, and certainly allows us to go forwards with the transformation activities that we need to move. So yeah, next one was then we look at is the application study. Part of our reorganisation have meant that we brought in product managers, and that was a shift change from what we had at the moment, what we had previously, which was application support managers. Again, no real insight or understanding as to what that application estate looked like in any great detail. It was rather harrowing to find out that we do have an extensive estate here. We are plus 200 applications, both covering, well, that's everything covering from line of business apps all the way through to software types, not individual versions. And so that again allowed us to, and informed us in terms of, you know, what sort of rationalisation work was going to be required, and certainly from a contracts perspective, you know, what sort of work that was going to need to manage those going forwards. Infrastructure and network reviews. So we used two-part here. Infrastructure review, we used the Mavere report sponsored by the Microsoft Azure migration plan. Our partner at the time, and they successfully were awarded the later works, was NTT Data, who were an incumbent. What that allowed us to do was gain insight and understanding as to what our infrastructure estate looks like, and to inform again what remediation works and optimization works were required. But then to say, okay, what does the size of our estate look like, and to start forecasting for costs. Very interesting at that point to bring finance into that journey, or to bring finance on that journey from that point, so that they could understand exactly how some of our strategies and design principles were going to help to save money longer term, or at least adapt the funding models that were existing at the moment to support the way that we needed to operate going forwards. And network assessment, we used the Cisco piece. Again, very important, at least at the COVID stage, that our network was able to maintain its performance and operational status across that piece. But then longer term, when you start to think about what does the future digital workplace look like, are we still going to be operating from a single civic centre? What does, you know, how do we use other points of presence across the borough in the future? That network becomes even more important. So that network assessment allowed us to inform what works and what strategies and investment was going to be required. ICT capability model assessment is quite an interesting one. So this breaks a little bit away from the traditional, let's just understand the tech estate. As I mentioned before, the organisation the department had just been through a belt and braces review. This was not a deck chair shuffling exercise. But moving into that piece, the operating model certainly needed to be adapted even further than what it had been before post-COVID. I personally, as a consultant and also as an enterprise architect, used a capability model to assess and to define strategies for IT operations and management of IT departments in the past. We took the capability model approach here. It allowed us to identify who across heads of function were required for what capabilities. For example, architecture would fit into me quite nicely, but when you take something like demand management, well, that's all of us. And on that case in point, what we were able to then do is agree a structured approach whereby we would develop those capabilities in parallel to all of the other works that we were doing. So at least we could prove to ourselves and the wider organisation that, look, we're not just here to fix the stuff, we're here to build for the future. And that was a really progressive way of being able to do that. That's been thoroughly well received by our executive team. The contract register was a difficult one, does need to be said, but we were able to start at least capturing all of the key contract information there, understanding, more broadly what the cost base looked like, where we had opportunities for rationalisation, and certainly what the size was going to be to manage those contracts going forwards. I mean, if you take an application estate of plus 200, plus the technologies that we have across infrastructure and network, end user compute, then all of the services, the licensing that you have, you're looking at a contract register of near on around 400 to 450. That's a significant size. So again, you then need to put, a lot of food. That's a lot of food for thought then for how you're going to manage that across a department of this size. Technical tool set review, again, very much linked to capability model, but to say, do we have the tools in place to operate this department as it is today? Where do we need to invest? Where can we leverage the Microsoft suite of tools that we get through Microsoft Teams, etc.? And then finally, initiate the portfolio. So as I said, we had a view of what our portfolio of work was, 145, but certainly that was ever changing, and to bring some governance and structures to that was a difficult task. So, just doing a round robin across each of the directorates through our business partner network to say, what is it you want to do, need to do, in a fashioned approach, just allowed us to gain that insight. And then certainly based on the inputs and the analysis done across our technical estate, we understood from a technology perspective what was required. That then brings us to the output. So what were we able to deliver? So the first one was the SMART strategy, which I'll come on to shortly, so I won't spoil that too much. The second one was the remediation program. Very large in size, considering the size of the estate here and the number of services that we need to deliver. We did immediately recognise that we couldn't deliver that ourselves. We'd used incumbent suppliers until a point, but even so, given the procurement legislation that's in place in local government at the moment, we felt that it was best that we bring in a partner who could support us on a longer term basis. What we looked to do was to take a more private sector approach in awarding that contract, and we called it the Strategic Transformation Partnership. We coupled together other maintenance and managed service requirements that we had into that bundle, and albeit it took quite a while to get out, we went to tender last October and were able to award in January to NTT, who is now our STP. NTT are now augmenting us here at Southend with consultancy, business and technology engineering resource to support and deliver on that remediation program across end user compute, infrastructure and network. We are, resolving the risks, mitigating risks, taking out the technical debt. We're working at a significant pace, and there's an amount of change going on here that a lot of people would be surprised at, but certainly we're making the hard yards are counting at the moment, which is great. The procurement schedule. So again, when you've got a contract register and of that size, you need to be able to work closely with your procurement teams and function to say, this is what, the amount of demand we're putting through you this year. So we've been able to put forward the first procurement schedule for 21-22, and at least to then inform them and to start thinking more strategically about, as to Cole's point earlier, how you use your vendors and your suppliers efficiently. We've done some excellent work there with, for example, Microsoft this year. At last count, we've received funding in the excess of 450,000 to support all of our works. That funding ranging from the Microsoft AMP program to the EAL uplift, education services, funding for devices, you name it, we've been able to beg, borrow and steal some of that funding from Microsoft to support us. And, they recognise that we use it very well. And so that creates opportunities in itself going forwards, which has been excellent. Service improvement plan, again, more at the capability level, and again, coming onto the capability program, but where exactly across our service layers do we need to focus attention on? And our operations team, and certainly the service desk team, has done a fantastic job there. We've recently implemented Hornbill, and we've got a case study coming through from Hornbill of just how excellent we've done in that implementation. We've also transformed dramatically the way in which we deliver service across the organisation, especially working the way that we are remotely at the moment, which has brought about benefits for us as a department. Morale is up. People feel that they're rewarded by the responses that we're receiving. That in turn creates a credibility and respect across the wider authority, and that always helps when you're undertaking transformation such as this. The capability program I've already mentioned before. Each of our function areas now know which capabilities they need to do, which each capabilities are their responsibility. We have a roadmap, both individually and collectively, that we're working through. I'm not going to lie and say that it's going smoothly. Capability here is obviously a very big piece, but it isn't necessarily always a priority. So we have to be careful in balancing that. Demand management, we are introducing governance mechanisms in technology and sharing those with the wider business in terms of how we receive demand, profile and prioritise the different works that are coming through. It is significant here. A lot needs to be fixed, and when your credibility builds and you start to prove that you can deliver, people then want more for you. So you have to balance that expectation with delivery and with budget powers as well. So demand management has been a very important milestone to reach. Application catalogue, again, we never had one before, but that then informed, again, what we do across product lines, introducing product management frameworks and methodologies, application, portfolio management and lifecycle management as well. Again, very important. And finally, service catalogue. So as part of the work that we've done with the service improvement plan, we've been able to introduce that service catalogue for the first time, standardising that, and now we're looking to introduce or at least revitalise the SLAs and the OLAs that support those for both our corporate, but for also our wider service partners as well. I'll pause there.
Yeah. Steve, great. There's a couple of questions that have come in.
Yeah, let me just pull them up.
There's one, I'm not sure who MRMA is, but they've said, is the 2050 ambitions related to carbon emissions?
It's a good question. Carbon emissions are important to us, as is all of the wider energy and social positioning. There are carbon emission targets within inside our 2050 ambition, and whoever MRMA is, feel free to reach out to me afterwards if you want to follow up on that.
Yeah. There was a question again from MRMA, which I've tried to answer, which was around under which input does data fall, governance, etc. And what I've said is that in my experiences in working in the data governance space, data governance is not an IT issue, it's a business issue. So you need to have your data owners, your data stewards, you need to get the data owners to take ownership of data quality, and that's got to be done across directorates and departments, and there's no quick win solution. And I think there's also the other thing I've realized over time is that how the quality of our systems that we develop and how good they are from a UX point of view and how much data they put in, the right data from users, is really important at the front end. Crap in, crap out, right?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that we focused on here with the smart city ambitions that we have got is to formulate what our data strategy will be. Here at Southend, we have our own data function here that sits out in the business, and they are a fantastic function. Technology will take some of the responsibility and accountability for the data, certainly as we build out our Azure function, or our Azure estate and architecture, which will support that. But data hasn't been covered yet, in all honesty, because it's of the complexity and size of it. What we chose to do is just say, look, there's only so much you can bite off. We'll come to data once we've hit a point of slowdown, albeit that I think many would agree we haven't reached that point yet, and we're 18 months on, but certainly we'll have to start getting to it very, very soon.
Let me just add a little bit to that, Steve, and maybe you can add more depth to this. I think with your enterprise architecture hat on, what I think you're developing from your outputs here is you've got a IT systems layer, you have an IT infrastructure layer, then you'll have an IT data layer, or architecture if you want to call it. So you're building the various layers of your architecture right up to your enterprise architecture and your capabilities. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's it. In such a way, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we know who MRMA is.
Yeah, so it's Marilena. Yeah.
Do you know who she is?
Yeah, so we worked together as at Coyas. So yeah, no.
Oh, okay, lovely.
Yeah, perfect.
Great. Sorry. Thank you, Marilena.
Okay, so let's go back then and understand. So with all of that information, that's a difficult story to tell. So if we go to the next slide, please, Cody.
Yeah.
What we then started to do was summarize that and present that to our executive team to gain their own understanding, or to develop their own understanding and to set expectations. It was quite a precarious situation. They just invested heavily in the reorg, and here we are saying you're going to need to continue to invest to transform this organisation and its technical estate to be able to support this transformation. But we didn't just position it as you've got a load of problems. What we decided to do was actually formulate very quickly the initial strategy, which is what we called SMART. So we'll go into the next slide, please. So what we decided to do was position it with an analogy that we felt our business executives would be able to understand. I think for too long, certainly, that our executives have been bamboozled with the technical sprout, as we call it, and the lingo, and they just didn't understand it. So we took it back to basics. And the analogy that we came up with here was house. So we as a leadership team had been given this house or given ownership of this house. They wanted that house to run as a cost-effective house. They wanted it to be efficient and effective, and if possible, to rent it out as some rooms out, or to turn it into a hotel. And we basically had to turn around and say, we have acquired 40 towers. We're going to need some money, please. And that helps break. The severity of the situation that you're trying to describe. And then what it allows us to do is then delve into that a little bit deeper following that analogy. So, we started to describe that the foundations of our house, the underlying infrastructure, the network were wobbly. The boiler was leaking, and played that through across a series of the financial aspects, the service issues, the solution, and then what the impact was likely to be further forwards. What we then started to do was to project via the roadmap and the portfolio that we had put together how we were going to treat that. So we'll go straight into the next slide.
Sure. Which
is SMART and the SMART themes that we have. So we explained, we're going to take an approach. Will probably seem not very conventional to you, given your experience of technology in previous years, but rest assured, this is what we would be doing in the private sector. So bear with us, and we'll see how we play through. And thankfully, we're doing a very good job of it. So SMART strategy is for technology and digital innovation, and whatever we do across SMART has to support what we are trying to do for 2050 and the other transformation programs within that. We've broken it down into 4 themes. So SMART tech is the foundations of that house. These are the technologies that any organization, whether we be a council, a financial powerhouse, energy, they need to have in place in order to operate. They're the underlying infrastructures, your support systems, your applications, and your network. We said that we were going to address the underlying and the current issues that we faced, and in doing so, take out the cost and prepare those foundations for the future. And again, using the house analogy, we want to go and build extensions, or we're going to need to build extensions. One such example was for the data lake, data warehouse, whatever it was going to be. We weren't building that on premise. We had to go into the cloud. And that, in why that opened the dialogue and facilitated that conversation to say, we're going into the Azure. Please back us. And they did so. They understood it. Next one was around smart working. So at this point in time, we had been very successful in transitioning all of our staff to remote working. Our DMS program was underway, but performance more generally across the board wasn't where we wanted it to be. The remediation program was underway to tackle some of that, but we kind of thought, look, you're going to have to, there's going to be a pain point here for a period, but let's think longer term. So in that, we started to consider how we wanted to operate as an organisation. Not necessarily just as, let's just provision O365 and people will work through Teams, but more broadly, what were the solutions? What was the office environment going to look like in 18 months, 2 years time, which is where we are today? Starting to think about that immersive working experience and how cultural and behavioural changes were going to be required in order to get to the organisation to where it needed to be post-pandemic. That brings us very nicely onto Smart Council. So for us, the house is part of a wider community. We wanted to join in and be part of that community through technology. We split Smart Council into two parts. The first one is looking at how we deliver our services out into the community, to residents, to local businesses, to partner services. And for us, we've got two key transformation vehicles at the moment, My Southend, and Hubs, which is looking at how we digitize our services and start to drive that self-service, that personalized approach to delivering services longer term. Smart Council, the other part of that is then looking at our council members and how they operate, what technologies do they want to use. It's well publicised at the moment that our councillors are now starting to move from hybrid meetings back into chambers, but we still need to facilitate our wider community and residents joining those. So we still need hybrid technologies moving forwards. But then following the elections, new council members joining, it's an opportunity to dust off or to remove some of that complexity that probably exists previously, and start to say, look, here's Microsoft Teams, this is what it can do for you, this is what SharePoint can offer you, and really get them on that journey at that point in time, from the first point that they join as council members. And then finally, Smart City. So certainly the biggest piece in all of this, we have Smart City ambitions. What does Smart City mean for us at Southend? It isn't just about infrastructure. It's not about everyone driving around in Teslas or smart bins that tell us when they're full up and need to be replaced. For us, we want to be a data-driven city, from everything that we do here as an authority to our partner services to how our residents operate and enjoy the local area. We're working very closely now with a number of leading edge other authorities and public sector bodies to understand how we position ourselves as a pilot authority moving forwards. We're certainly doing some good space, or due to start doing some good stuff in the energy space, working with Suffolk to understand how we can use some of their data platforms to inform what we do here. But certainly, overall, this is where some of our priorities around economic regrowth, recover from pandemic, really start to play out as we rebuild our economy in the local area.
Okay, Steve, great. Time's flown by. Shall we just quickly do a quick wrap up on our key takeaways? And we've got a poll still to go through. I think in summary, I think there's a really good consensus and the data's out there that, pre-COVID and as a consequence of COVID, digital business IT investments will continue, but they will get scrutinized for business value. Efficiency, effectiveness, is it growth, is it give us compliance, will improve the citizen experience. We just need to take that for granted. Based on the model I talked about in terms of IT cost optimization, Southend went on the let's have a look at the whole thing. What's your thought on that? Because I think knowing the grander picture before you can focus is really important, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we understand, how big the pie is, and we've got to get through it, as best we can with the resource that we've got. We now know how to prioritize and action against that. We've chosen some really, really important pieces here that we feel will add immediate value. Again, build that credibility, help to save or retain some monies, and then we can reinvest that accordingly.
Yeah, and I think looking at your asset database or your asset estate, looking at your contracts and your supplier base to think about what financial value you can release, and working with the business and directors and departments to understand where that could be extracted, really gives credibility to the business, to IT, because IT typically are very good at the nuts and bolts and systems and infrastructure and tin and so forth, moved cloud. But if we can work on better financial controls of the business, that adds tremendous value to IT. Thoughts?
Yeah. No, I mean, absolutely
Yes.
spot on. Yeah, I mean, the answer is yes, right? So,
Yeah. Okay.
I think the one thing that I would say is that a lot of this takes, significant work to get your head around it and to drive it.
Yeah.
So it's about, setting realistic expectations,
Sure.
knowing what's achievable, and setting those and working with your key stakeholders. I think a lot of the time, enough time isn't spent with those senior stakeholders, your senior leadership network, your executives, for them to understand it. And so you can probably appreciate when they become disgruntled because you haven't kept that communication up.
Sure.
So yeah, no, it's really, I would say that that's a big takeaway for me.
Yeah, and the department needs to kind of work within the business for that bigger journey. And I think time spent being transparent and open and honest as leaders to the challenges you have kind of gives the business more empathy towards you, so that they can help and support the journey that you're going on. And if there are issues and frustrations and concerns, I think it's important to be open and frank about them. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we rely heavily on our business partner. I mean, that was a key introduction as part of our reorg. But the business partners that we've got in here have built solid relationships.
Yeah.
With the business, and it is, it's a new way of operating for them. So you have to give business time. You have to nurture those relationships, educate them on the value and the benefit that they can bring. It takes time. I won't say that we're there yet, but certainly we've had some big success stories. One of those being the local elections, which is always a good one.
And Steve, it can't always be success, can it? In these kind of journeys, there's going to be some failures, and digital is a really interesting concept from a culture perspective. But what it says, in my view, if you're going to innovate, try stuff, make it work, create a POC, minimal viable product. And if it doesn't work, can it, but learn from it and move on from your failure. What would you say? I mean, none of these programs are smooth journeys, right?
No, I mean, we test everything on ourselves. So we are the test bed
Yeah.
within the department now. We then leverage what we call the business champions as a first point of presence into the business to test any technologies we're rolling out. We made the correct decision, albeit it was questioned at the time, to introduce a change in enablement function within the department. So they take responsibility for communicating and educating the business as we roll out these new technologies. So that's everything from 365 to new secure email and file transfer solutions. That's worked an absolute treat. That's again an investment that people wouldn't necessarily rely on. They'd say corporate HR or workforce training would take that. It's a skill set. You need to understand it. So that's worked through. And to your point around failure, we encourage ourselves to fail because we really do press everything to the utter limit to make sure that it's sufficient, whether that's in product testing, application, infrastructure testing, all the way through to the strategy itself and testing that with all types of stakeholders. We go out across a broad range and say, pull this apart for us, tell us that this is the right thing to do, and then bring it back and say, right, we iterate, and we're happy to do that. I think the only thing that we don't encourage ourselves to do is fail twice. For that, then we haven't learned, and that's not a good thing.
Sure. Okay. Should we kind of get into our second poll again? Folks, we'd like to encourage you to get back into your Slido app. There's the barcode. In this second survey, what we're asking you to do is tell us a little bit about what you think or what you would like us to talk about going forward. And we've got 6 options. So let me just switch over back to Slido and move on to our second poll. So the first one is IT landscape. Would you like to hear about how we got the environment under control and started managing it? How would you do that? How do you manage technical debt? What's the approach? What's the reference model? And getting out the dead wood if you want to. Second one is about the IT landscape. How did we get this under control and start to manage it? Got past that one, technical debt. Using capability models to develop future-proof technology department. A third one, a fifth one, sorry, on business change, the importance of engaging and enabling with technology departments. Is that something that you'd like to hear from us about? Is there something around contract management? How would you best leverage suppliers, contractors, BAU resource, strategic resourcing, and how do you get a roadmap for change with finance? And you can vote for more than one. Would you like us to talk about capability and maturity models to develop IT operating models? Please vote away.
Okay, interesting split.
Contract management, wow.
Yeah, I think it's a big one at the moment.
And business change. Well, I would say business change is always top of the agenda because whenever I've done, I don't know, umpteen webinars around digital change, and every time I get the question around how do you get to develop a culture for change and, deal with change fatigue, change resistance. So I'm not surprised that is high up there. Sorry, Steve, yours.
I was just going to say, look, I mean, this isn't going to be a talking shop. During these sessions, I will be sharing the methods, the skills, and the lessons learned through it. And then we'll be breakout sessions afterwards where, I'll be offering some of my personal time to support those who want it. What we've committed to as part of these sessions is actually to share that actual how you do it. We want to move away from the conceptual and talk about the physical implementation of these mechanisms. So there'll be a lot of detail and hopefully you'll find it of value.
Yeah, we'll have models that we can share, and he said we'll take you through the process to go it, and we'll show you the outputs like Steve has done today, so that you can actually see the outcomes. Okay.
Contract management it is then.
Here's the top one, mate.
Okay, all right.
Right, I'm going to just switch back to the presentation, and I want to. Can you see the slides again?
Yep.
Just wanted to talk about something else that we're doing, Steve, at Southend. One of the things that we've developed is a digital gamification platform, which really builds trust and empathy between business and IT and how they interact. And it's a virtual gamification. And if you can see the little cycle in the middle, in this game, you play an airline in the airline market sector, and you look across 4 KPIs of customer improvement, satisfaction, benefits realization, revenue, and profitability. And you play a number of strategic plays, and you implement them and you observe them through dashboards. And it's done virtually with a team of 5 or 10. And really, it's all about experiential learning in a safe environment. You can learn about best practices and try to think about how that could apply into your own environment, in your own organization. So it kind of allows you to see the future of how your decisions that you want to make could turn out to be on particular KPIs. Steve, do you want any comments on how you're going to be using this gamification across?
Yeah, so we're going to. I mean, it really is going to be a powerful tool for us. So the intention is that with the right investment, we'll be able to roll this out first across technology. And then what we want to do is bring some key business stakeholders into this, certainly from the corporate aspect. So corporate strategy and finance will be important allies on this transformation journey. So we want to bring them in first. And then some of the not so allies. So we want to bring in people that probably don't have that understanding or that the experience of what it is to undertake a digital transformation. But say they do, we all have them in our organisations. Bring them in and ask them to be looking at, or ask them to participate. Right, take away their lessons learned, understand it a little bit more, and look. At least you can start to build those relationships through doing something that is really, really fun. It's a fantastic platform.
Yeah, and it's not only for experiential learning, but it adds as a team building. It breaks silo. It allows you to break silos, understand other people's perspectives from the department, so you can act as that conduit for change. If you really enjoyed our presentation, here's our contact details. Thank you for the data that you provided in terms of the polls and the inputs. You can reach out to us to talk to us as we kind of start designing what those set of webinars could be for the future. And Steve, I think there's a few. Is there any comment, anything else you would like to say at this stage before we address any questions?
No, just thank you very much for joining. I hope everyone's taken some value. For those at Southend who have joined, this is our presentation. We've been on that journey. We've succeeded, and we'll continue to succeed. So, very well done.
Yeah, I just got a couple of comments I want to pick up on because we do have a few minutes. Terry has said the gamification has been used for cybersecurity risk investment. Yeah, it can. We're building cybersecurity, and then we're building an AI RPA in the future. Nice comment from Tony Hole as well.
Right, thanks, Tony.
And Ian, and Iqbal, and Richard. Thank you for your positive feedback. It's really appreciated. I would like to, if there's any burning questions, please ask them now. We've probably got a few minutes. Steve, you can carry on for a few more minutes.
Yeah, sure, no, absolutely.
I will try to. I'm going to adjust the settings, so everybody should be able to unmute themselves now. Tell me if you can't. If anybody wants to ask a question and they can't, just let me know. Thank you, John. Really.
Thanks, John.
Anybody wants to?
I think that's it. I think we've done our job here today.
Okay, well, look, contact details here again, and just look out for future LinkedIn events related to our story that Steve has articulated and some of the things that we're going to bring along.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, everybody.
Cheers.
Take care. Bye-bye.